All right, let's finish up chapter 12, talking about various technological influences on your job as a media manager. Let's move now to mobile applications, smartphones in particular. The portability and ease of the mobile phone means growing numbers of consumers will access entertainment and information away from home. That is becoming more and more of a practice where if you're looking up things on the internet, it's generally more convenient most times to do so on your portable device than to pull up your laptop or sit down at your desktop computer. However, that does not mean that they will abandon their large screen TVs or their computers, because some things work better on those particular platforms. What does mobile do then? It adds utility and connectivity for people on the go, especially for business users, things that are much better served in a much more immediate fashion. So things like messaging, email, things like that, even breaking news from a media standpoint, those sort of things become very effective on mobile applications. And while some people do digest long-form entertainment on their smaller devices, there's still kind of that love for the larger screens when it comes to certain types of gaming and certain types of program consumption. Tablet devices, kind of that middle ground, outselling computers, providing another disruptive technology. It's basically the smartphone, but it's bigger. Provides many of the conveniences of the smartphone, except possibly not being able to carry it in your pocket. You know, maybe you whip it out of your book bag or something like that. But in some instances provides a unique experience in engaging with content. And then wearable technology, things like smartwatches, virtual reality devices, these can provide ease of content delivery through new experiences. And many of these technologies are still developing in terms of some of the features and the things that they can do. Smartwatches in particular, monitoring a lot of things in terms of what's happening with your body, you know, people using them as pedometers and heart rate monitors and things like that, in addition to alerting of important messages and that sort of thing. And then VR just being a whole nother area of entertainment that is starting to catch on. The cloud. We talk about the cloud as a means of representing services and software available over the internet rather than keeping things on your desktop computer or some sort of physical storage device like a disk or a USB drive or something like that. The cloud operates on the internet and in reality is a system of massive computer servers networked together to perform different processes. And the cloud is becoming more and more popular for various types of activities, especially when it comes to data. The cloud offers advantages of backing up important data, providing off-site storage to save on physical servers that are located elsewhere. It allows for the ability for shared work among many users. You can invite people into various files and have them collaborate with you. It offers low maintenance and labor costs. You don't have to worry about a USB thumb drive or a disk drive failing, for example. Also providing quick and easy access to material. As long as you have an internet connection, that data is always going to be open to you. And one of the other things that's not in the book that's kind of emerging is the kind of increased interest in having virtual computers that are located on the cloud, where you can basically fire up a remote server somewhere from any device that you have and connect to a actual computer somewhere else. And you can have these computers run various operating systems and perhaps even have increased specs on those remote computers that may be helpful for people that need higher speed technologies but have a lower spec computer at home. That's something that's just starting to catch a little bit of steam in the past year or two. Uses for management when it comes to cloud services, well, storage and access. The cloud is a cost-efficient and easy way to store any type of digital data and have it available on demand so long as there is that internet connection. With that, data sharing. The cloud allows projects to be shared for collaboration among work groups, especially those working in remote areas. It makes it so that people don't have to be in the office at their desk doing a particular thing. They can do it just about anywhere. Archiving. The cloud offers long-term and aggregate storage of different types of digital data with no upfront costs by the local enterprise. This is also one of the reasons why cloud PC computing is becoming more prominent, because you can have the latest and greatest, and upgrades are a whole lot easier because you don't have physical equipment that you have to upgrade. Greater security and disaster recovery, also a good use from a management perspective. There is greater security where you have to have passwords, sometimes two-factor authentication, in order to access these materials that are online. And should something happen where the PCs and devices that you use to connect to the cloud wind up getting destroyed somehow, because all that stuff is in the cloud in the server somewhere else, you don't lose your data. Finally, e-commerce. Purchasing and procurement are typically faster and more secure using cloud-based systems than in local systems. Services that provide these sorts of hosting services tend to be very secure, and they tend to have people watching those systems like a hawk to make sure that their clients' data is protected. Audience research, another good use for cloud services. Along with the rise of big data, cloud-based research services will be the norm for accessing and generating research from multiple sources. And we already see that with services like Nielsen and Scarborough, providing different types of data to TV and radio stations. Sales and traffic systems also largely getting more and more on the cloud. Advertisers and marketers are able to choose their own forms of advertising, better control of their budgets, able to look and see when their commercials are scheduled to air. It makes invoicing a lot easier. Payment systems become easier because you can do it online. And then finally, HR and personnel data. Most businesses have moved all of that to the cloud as well in order to take advantage of all the different things that we've talked about already when it comes to having your information on the cloud. Some business models as far as keeping technology in mind. Well, we have to kind of change with the times a little bit here. The electronic media industries have depended on advertising for the bulk of their revenues throughout history. And the way that we've done advertising has largely been the same until the advent of new media. Advertisers recognize the challenges of audience fragmentation and reaching new audiences, and because of that, advertisers are now continuing to move money to digital media platforms from traditional media. There's different metrics that we see in terms of how we gauge audiences through online platforms than what we've traditionally done with terrestrial radio and television. And if you can navigate through that data, it can be much more telling in terms of who is engaging with content and who is not. Some other business models would include applications, companies making money on applications through the direct purchase of the app and by selling advertising or other features within the application. Many apps are available for a free download as long as you're willing to put up with the ads that bombard that particular app, or you could pay a small fee to not have to deal with the ad interruptions. Applications can be used as extensions of existing media products and perceived as added value for customers, which can lead to new customers, especially if you're starting out with an app. Many companies have found that if a client buys traditional advertising, they may offer a certain amount of digital advertising for free, or that there's options to do some incorporated mentions on social media or on various apps and things like that. And that adds to the overall package that an advertising client may be agreeing to with a TV or radio station. Subscriptions, another business model. Consumers have shown a willingness to pay for the services they use to avoid said advertising. With media use becoming more personalized, subscriptions are likely to gain in number. Over time, we could move to an environment where most media consumption occurs on a pay-as-you-go or a la carte basis. Some cable systems are starting to realize this and are making more and more different tiers of service, or being able to choose up to a certain number of stations that the cable outlet will provide to you for a certain cost. We're going to see that become more and more specialized, especially as different apps and services come on the screen, forcing traditional media and other streaming services to play along. Finally, pay for play. Pay for play can be thought of in much the same way as pay-per-view on cable TV. So instead of a monthly or annual subscription, you simply pay for the actual content that you consume. Lots of streaming services already use a model similar to this, where you can pay a couple of dollars to watch a particular movie or to engage with a particular game for a certain amount of time, or things like that. Price point is what becomes important in this particular model. Is the audience willing to pay for that particular item? How much are they willing to pay? How much is it worth to them? Those are things that the more and more that we move to these sorts of platforms and determine whether or not they're going to be advertiser supported and can thus be given for free, or if we're going to ask the actual consumers to pay into them. Consumers only have so much money to divvy up between various services. It may come to a point where they're going to have to pick and choose if we move more and more towards subscription and pay for play models. Some issues from a management perspective. Personnel, first and foremost, personnel must be able to adapt to a widely changing technological landscape. A great example of how this had to happen was during the height of the COVID-19 crisis, where we saw newscasters, anchors, reporters, now all of a sudden, instead of having the equipment that they're used to in the studio and with the vehicles from the station, we now see reporters broadcasting their content from home studios, and reporters using their smartphones to capture video content. We're also seeing a lot more remote application in radio, where Air Talent are broadcasting their shows from home. A key challenge is not only finding new personnel with the requisite skills, but also continually retraining and retooling the existing employees to keep them trained for new applications and technologies that impact their job function. We already talked about it from an on-air perspective, but also from the sales and business perspectives, knowing how to do cloud computing, knowing how to use various web services, or to be able to connect to a computer remotely, knowing how to do video conferencing and collaborating on a project from different locations. All those sorts of things are going to become normative, and people need to learn how to be savvy enough to be able to use those different programs and services. Fragmentation is going to continue to be an issue, more and more so. Really, it's not so much now that we're looking at demographics in general, kind of like what we do with traditional media. More and more, we're looking at of psychographics and hypergraphics, where we're really honing in on particular people in particular subgroups that have particular interests. And the more content that is being catered to those different audiences, the more that we're going to have to think about how we reach them on those micro levels as opposed to the macro levels that we did with broadcast media. Traditional electronic media managers are going to have to develop comprehensive strategies involving new media and social media, focusing on the key platforms demanded for their specific business enterprise, and not just those platforms, but knowing which platforms your audience is on and how the audiences use those particular platforms. These are things that we talk about more when you get into the social media class. But the thing here for us to understand is that managers have to continually and constantly rethink methods of distributing content beyond traditional approaches and what that means for impacting the intended audience. Fragmentation is yet another basic reason behind media consolidation and conglomeration. By expanding and promoting economies of scale and scope, electronic and digital media companies increase leverage by buying into new markets. So this is one of those cases where the big boys are going to have an advantage because they have the money to invest in some of these technological advances and be able to use advanced services within some of these different web applications and social media platforms, and also to be able to hire people to manage those things on a full-time and intensive sort of basis. But aren't social media platforms free? By and large, yes. But if you're only using the free services and not taking advantage of some of the various integrated items that you can purchase to help you to manage social media, see things in one location, do more multitasking and things like that, we might not be investing more money into these things, but in a way we are, because we have to invest more time in those things. So you have labor cost that's going to be involved there, or the loss of time at the very least that can be spent on other things. And then creating enterprise value. For traditional radio broadcasters, much hope is placed on further developing their digital platforms, things like high definition and streaming radio. These things are, they're going to help in certain ways in offering more variety, but at this point, is it too little, too late? Time will tell. The applications market for mobile devices will be the greatest area for growth among broadcast stations. So using that integration of new media to point back to things that are happening on traditional media and the other way around as well. Cable is well positioned in its ability to draw revenues from many different tiers and services, which adds enterprise value for cable operators. Some of the challenges here is that many of the traditional cable networks are kind of strong-arming cable and satellite because of vertical integration, that a company like Viacom, for example, that holds Nickelodeon and Comedy Central and MTV and VH1 and BET and several other stations, could tell a cable operator, you have to carry all of our stations or you're not going to get to carry any of them. And that's some of the negotiations that happen there. So sometimes that puts cable and satellite into a bit of a pickle in terms of what it pays out to the various cable channels and therefore what they charge you, the consumer. Satellite remaining a strong number 2 video service while having to partner with other operators to provide telephone and internet services. Internet starting to catch up a little bit with companies like Starlink, but for the most part, you can't bundle phone and internet with cable television like you can with the cable company in the exact same way. It's generally still separate entities. The satellite company providing you television, the telephone company providing you telephone, and then internet sometimes coming from telephone or perhaps from a wireless service. Finally, no industry offers a clear competitive advantage over the others, and each area will be fighting for audiences, advertisers, and their own economic future in a rapidly changing, intense environment. In other words, we don't necessarily have the company yet that is one size fits all. Not every medium out there is going to be able to have complete penetration of the American consumer market. Until that happens, which who knows how long it'll take for that to happen, could be a couple of years, could be several years, who knows. But until then, there's still going to be various services that are going to appeal to various audiences for various needs. The accessibility of those services also going to be a huge factor. And up until that point that something comes out that is ubiquitous for all, you're going to have that certain segmentation to where there's a viability for everyone in some way, shape, or form. The question is, who is going to survive, and how big does a company have to be in order to survive? That's something that we have yet to see, although we could make some inferences based on what we've seen over the past 25 years or so. So with that, we're going to close out Chapter 12. Finish those notes and study questions, get those turned in, complete the survey on Blackboard, and come to class with your thoughts on the future of media and what that means, not just from a consumer standpoint, but what that means from a managerial standpoint. How do you keep track of stuff? How do you predict what the innovations are going to be and what audiences are going to be attracted to? And what sort of strategies do you put in place as a result? Think about that and bring your other thoughts when we come to class so that we can discuss them.